Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have with us Mr. Martin Pratt, and welcome to the conversation, Mr. Pratt.
Appreciate it. Thank you for creating this intentional space. I think that's something in today's world we don't get a chance to really observe Black men having a candid conversation about the Black male impact.
Okay, man, I appreciate it. But before we get into the conversation itself or the questions that I have to ask you today, I just want you to, share with the listeners something about yourself. I know the question may touch on some parts of what you will share, but go ahead and please share something about yourself, what you're doing, and how the listeners can have a feel of who you are.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Cross. I I started in technology in the 80s and when I was still in high school. And then in the 90s, when I finally moved out of New Jersey to New York, I was really struggling a little bit with trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And it was the right at the tail end of the 90s that I landed on having conversations around technology and really being able to impact the Black community with what I thought was necessary conversations on the digital divide. Additionally, my neighbor was Omar Wasu, and Omar would come by this internet cafe, and I was running the internet side of the cafe. And Omar would use internet access, which was back then, the T1 line. So it was very unheard of, especially in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And Omar would work on something called New York Online, which then became Black Planet. So being around that space of New York and the creator side, the content side, and also the beginnings of what we would call, eventually would call Silicon Alley, really impacted me and how I thought about access and the information side of technology, which eventually became blogging and MySpace and those things. And then, of course, podcasting. And every step of the way, and somehow in my life, it looks like I was very intentional, but I was just at the right time, at the right moment. It wasn't necessarily something that I intended to happen. But in doing the radio show that I did, was blessed to be able to do in New York. It was the first Black technology talk show on FM radio. And we did that for 13 years from 2003 to 2016 on WHCR 90.3 FM. Same time that was happening, my aunt was like, "Hey, can you help us with the bookstore?" Because I went to college. That was Sisters Uptown Bookstore. And I ran that bookstore. And the bookstore is only about 16 blocks away from the radio station. So I lived in Harlem. We consider that part of Harlem, Washington Heights. And at the same time, was also helping authors on MySpace. And then my radio co-host said, "You should be on this thing called Twitter." And I wasn't really trying to be on another social impact or social media or, just I was done. And so she really pushed me hard to get on Twitter. So I got on Twitter with a name that was doing really well on MySpace with called Culture First with a K. That didn't do anything, didn't pop. But then I took I love Black women, ILUV Black women to Twitter. So I was the first person on Twitter with the word Black in their Twitter name.
Oh, wow.
And that took off. I did not tweet anything. I had 100 followers. So I knew I was onto something. I was like, well, what is this? What is this thing called Twitter? And I realized that, like she said, it was a communication tool that reminded me of something to instant talk to someone across the internet without any kind of real software. It didn't have, you had to be on AOL, you had to be on CompuServe, or you had to be, it was a real balancer. And I was like, wow, this is really powerful. And at the same time that was happening, Obama was running for president, got elected, and we got into a big argument on Twitter over the word Black and the word post-racial. So about four of us argued for across a weekend. So for 48 hours from a Friday night till really a Monday morning or a Sunday night. we argued with a bunch of people, and we started the hashtag Black for everything we did. So every time we tweeted something, we used hashtag Black, and so we're considered the grandparents to Black Twitter. Unfortunately, two of those people, Mike Street, Mr. Mike Street, and then April Davis, who was around Harlem. Both Harlemites, interesting. I didn't think about this just now, really. But and Wayne said Mike Street and April passed on. We lost Mike last year to cancer. April,
Sorry to hear that.
yeah. So anyway, the founders of the grandparents, I like to call us the grand. I don't like the word founder in this case because I think that we were intentional about that argument and intentional about the reason for using the word Black, but not necessarily where it's morphed into. And a lot of people, the next week actually, one of the one of the founders of Jack and Jill Politics, and also he wrote How to Be Black. He started using the hashtag Black in a different way. So I think that it's a bunch of us that contributed to the prominence of Black Twitter and what it morphed into, or what it even is today. Anywho, that's kind of my social media street cred and my tech cred and my radio cred. I think where I'm at today, which is just helping brands that are Black amplify and reach a Black audience. That's something that is pretty new for me. It's like the last 5 years.
All right, man, that sounds great, especially within the technology space. I know that's where a lot of actions are taking place and a lot of movements are being formed and some great impacts are happening because, everyone seems to be on the internet today. So if you can manage that space well, you can reach quite a few people, maybe easier today than it used to be. So I'm not going to go over most of what you had shared just now, but I know we'll touch back on some of those areas that you are in and the impact that you're having with the stuff that you're doing today. So again, thanks for being here. And my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I think that you have to have intention. I like to call it intentional intelligence. So whatever your intention is, you do it the most intelligent way that you have access to. The intelligence I have access, or the intel I have access to, is different than your intel. And so you're using your intention to the most intelligent way you can to have an impact and that mindset that, in spite of anything, my daughter was born. I have a 1-year-old. Last year, she was born around this time. She stayed in a NICU for 80 days, and she was born not breathing. And so the hospital said, the hospital we were in with her at that moment was Penn University, and they said, "Hey, you may need to get ready for your daughter to be a vegetable, and what is her quality of life is going to be like. So basically, be ready to pull the plug when we tell you it's time to pull the plug." And fortunately, that wasn't the case. And her doctor left that hospital, went across the street to Children's Hospitals, asked us to take her over there. And I did. While that was happening, and my wife was in the hospital with a C-section, I had launched Your Black News, and mainly on Clubhouse. And so I'm doing a nightly news show while my child's in the NICU. My doctor coming to me telling me that she's going to not be here any longer. And I think what I realized in that moment was that I have a community who's amazed that I'm still on my purpose. I'm still producing impact. And because of their amazement, I said, well, let me use that and crowdsource how I can keep going. So I put up a website for Zora, and my daughter's name is Zora May, but forzora.com. And I would update, what was happening with her case and her story. And then I would ask people to give me their NICU story or their situation that they experience. We call it birth trauma in the community. So if you experience any birth trauma, please share. And I got over 400 people that gave me their individual story. I mean, some was just phenomenal. Child's less than 1 pound, and now they're 6 foot tall and 260 pounds. Just some crazy, just like, whoa. And when you hear other people's mindset, then you realize you can do it. because they did it. There's no way that you can't do it. But to answer your question, that thing that kept me moving towards something was I fed off of other people's energy that were amazed that I was moving forward. So in the movement, well, I said, well, okay, if you're amazed, then there might be somebody else who's amazed. And since you're amazed, I get a chance to ask you a question. I get a chance to get feedback from you. And in that feedback loop, that helps me stay on purpose. I think that we don't get a chance. I say we, I'm talking about Black men. We don't get a chance to stop and kind of just pause and think about what our next move is going to be. A lot of times we're in reactionary mode because we've been born, we were positioned that way. I mean, my child, she's not a male, obviously, but she will be in that position of non-reactory. She'll be in a position of meditation. She'll be in a position of affirmations every day. She'll be in a different position. I didn't grow up that way at all. I got to the affirmation and the mindset place at 28 when someone walked off the street and gave my secretary a book called The Power of Positivity. He heard me on the radio talking about the digital divide. He was like, "You are just too apocalyptic. You're just too negative. You need to just be more positive. You get better, you get more response." And at that time, I didn't change, by the way, what I was talking about and how I delivered it. But personally and business wise, that book was the book that really spoke to my spirit because it said basically at the core value is that if you believe that this is possible, you will receive. And here are a bunch of case studies in places that you in your life that the power of positivity has helped you. You don't even know it's helped you. So I live with the concept of rituals. If you reproduce this thing over and over and over and over and over again every single day, whether that's exercise or meditation or having the right lover, having the right mate, having the right community, something along that way will keep you going. Something along that way, whether it's your community you build, whether it's your children, whether it's your love of your life, or a relationship, or your passion, you'll be amazed by something come along. So something negative is going to happen to you every single day. And something, I try to position myself where I have 2 to 3 positives and 1 negative. So my expectation is not like I expect not that I want to my flight to be delayed, but I expect that's a possibility. So while my flight is delayed, I have a book. I have something I'm looking forward to listening to on Audible, or I have something that I really want a small project. I really want to get to this concept. And I have someone I started a conversation with that at the drop of a dime, I can easily hit them up and say, so tell me more about this idea of how hemp is going to repair the ozone. So it could be, so if have downtime, I have several different things I can go to keep me moving forward and not concentrate on the fact that I'm stuck at the airport for 4 hours. I'm not tweeting about it. I'm not putting it up. I'm not complaining about it. Everybody calls me. I got off the plane today in New Jersey from Lafayette, Louisiana, and I'm sorry, I didn't get off the plane yet. And the person that arranged for the flight called me and said, "Hey, just checking in. How are you?" Because it was raining, a lot of flights were delayed. And I said, "Oh, I'm on the tarmac. I just touched down." She said, "Oh, good, you're there. So how do you feel?" And so my point is that I invite that energy to check in on me. I don't repel that energy. And a lot of times when someone just checks in on you, you never know when that check-in is going to be the thing that keeps you going. So I really strongly believe that intention, what do you intend to do? And are you doing it the most intelligent way that you can do? So this is my recipe. It's my gumbo, or it's my jambalaya, or it's my brown stew chicken, But somebody else's brown stew chicken may not have pink Himalayan salt and bay leaves in it. May have something else. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that's their recipe. So I think everybody with it, we have all our intentions. How you flavor that intention to keep you going is a concept that I think Black men, unfortunately, due to environmental issues, we aren't taught that at like 16 or 12. We aren't giving the coping mechanism. We are giving coping mechanisms, but we aren't giving coping mechanisms that keep us making impact over and over again, unless you fall into like athlete or you may have gone to the military. Certain careers, certain trajectories have that built into them. But if you're not exposed to that, even I think maybe you can speak to this. I've had several friends who went through the doctoral tracks, and I'm now at 51 prepared to help people get through their doctoral dissertation. But at 30, I was like, listen to them, like, yo, just give up, man. Just like you got your masters, like that's good. Why are you dealing? Why are you putting yourself in that position? Because it just sounded like it was insurmountable. But after watching people go through it over and over again, I'm like, okay, there's certain traits. There's certain so when I can sense this person saying, I might okay, so you need to find a mentor. You need to da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But that's because I've lived through other people going through that situation, and I identified things that made them succeed. But again, not something we're born into, not something that we're even really trained for. It's just something that if your eyes are wide open and you see success in a certain trajectory, there are traits of that success that you can reproduce in other people.
Yeah, I really like the intentional intelligence and have some intentions that you want to get done in a particular day. And I like how you put it. You want to do it with intelligence. And also that you share, which I really like. And it's something that we need to really value. And it is where you said if something happened that we don't like, don't complain about it, but find ways to use it to do something positive. And that's something that we can do. We can be intentional about what we do, despite what's going on. So those analogies that you shared, especially, as you said, the airport, and even when you got that book, when the person gave you the power of positive thinking,
Power
positive.
positivity.
Yes, I think that's something that we need. Even if it's always good to be reminded, how important it is to be positive because we're not going to be able to control everything that happens to us
Nope.
on the
Yep.
journey. So learning to be positive despite what happened will help us, as we navigate this journey going forward. So that perspective and insight is really important. And it's a great reminder to us all. And also where you share that even though we may do it this way and somebody else do it another way, you still want to be able to see the positive because how you do it may be different, but you want to make sure you're looking at the positive as you're going forward.
Absolutely. I think with the saying with great power comes great responsibility. Unfortunately, we don't live in an equal society. So being male affords us certain privileges, and being able to identify the fact that we have a privilege of masculinity, and not saying that we should have that privilege, but how are you going to use that privilege? And then being able to identify the expectation isn't that I know that failures. I know that I am going to draw negativity to me, but I do know I'm living in an imperfect world. I am imperfect, and everybody else around me is imperfect. So stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
When that stuff happens, how we respond to it, and that's what I'm saying. Like we really, to me, it really feels sometimes disingenuous for men to stand on and to talk about different topics that I see on Clubhouse or I'll see on Facebook or Instagram. And it's like, bro, you're a dude. Like you get paid more than women do. Like, okay, yeah, but but you get paid more than they do. It's just a fact. So figure that out for yourself. But for me, that means that I need to partner with another person to get whatever I'm trying to get done. But at the same time, I also need to give back, or I need to pull somebody or position somebody over me that use my privilege in the right way. So I'm doing too much to sit there and complain about this thing I didn't receive. And the last thing I want to land on is just to say that, when you're talking, I thought about we know certain things, whether that be your You may be co-parenting with someone that you're not no longer with, or you may have a blended family. You know their pain points. You know it. You're 100% sure that you have these pain points because it comes up every other week. Identifying the pain point isn't the struggle. The struggle is pushing yourself to accept it and then changing it. And man, I talk to so many people, and I don't try to coach. I don't. That's not a thing I like. But I built a community, so people come to me, and I like, okay, I get it. I let them talk for like 2, 4, 5 minutes, sometimes 10, and then I'll say, so what you gonna do about it? And it's like, well, Matt, okay, but we actually talked about this 3 times in the last year. This keeps coming up. What are you going to do? At some point, you have to accept the responsibility. That great power comes with great responsibility, and build into your system. How do I deal with this when this person complains that I don't that I'm getting too close to the kids, or whatever the situation is? How are you going to deal with that and move past this? Because and here's the other thing about being a man, or being, it's not just men, but I'm saying this to Black men because we're just our topic.
Yeah.
There is not going to be a time that you don't have to work. There's just not. Like, dude, you gotta work when you go to the hotel lobby. So I'm at the lobby and they want my debit credit card. So I give them a debit credit card. The money comes out my account. The guy goes, okay, sign. I go to sign, the screen's gone. So he said, oh, good, you got to do a transaction again. Now, I know from transactions that money is held.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't get it, it came out of my Cash App, or it came out of my PNC, or whatever it is. And I take my phone and I show them, you don't have it, but I don't have it either. Now what? And so it's like, but I'm ready to deal with that type of energy because I've done it so many times. As one speaker, this one group, they gave me a fellowship. I flew down to Florida for the fellowship. They put us in a hotel. I said, listen, it's a week-long hotel, and I'm not going to mention the chain. I said, they're going to hold a week long of daily charges. No. We use them all the time. This is a billionaires foundation. And like, no, Mr. Pratt, we got this. All right, okay, cool. I fly in at 12 o'clock at night. Call me. If you got a problem, you get the front desk, call me. Got it, Jill. Get to the front desk. Hey, Mr. Pratt, can I get your card? Hold it. No, the foundation has their card on. No, that's not how we do things. I said, okay. Hey, Jill, I'm at the front desk. It's 12:05. They're trying to charge my card and not the corporation's card. And Jill's like, really? I'm like, yes. But when I got my fellowship, when they gave me my travel arrangement, when I asked to speak to a travel person, I explained what's going to happen. She said, absolutely positively not. That's not going to happen, Mr. Pratt. We got to use this hotel all the time. She gave me because I was so adamant about it, she gave me her personal information. So I'm standing there at 12 o'clock midnight talking to her, and she talks to the person at the front desk, and she has to end up giving her card, not the company card, because of the situation. But my point is that I anticipated that. That is something I've dealt with. I know it's coming up, and I accepted it, and I move on. But I think a lot of times we get caught in that cycle of, I can't believe it happened. Okay, now what?
That is true. And that's the type of having the mindset to deal with those unexpected things that sometimes happens, that you know will happen. And instead of staying in it and try to force it, as you said, let's how we deal with this going forward. So you don't stay there and maybe get hungry and
Right.
stuff like that, because that's not going to really help. So I really like that perspective, because we have challenges in our daily life that we will not know, or there will be situations that we're not going to be able to plan for, but they just happen. And how we deal with those situations can really either make the day better or make the day worse. So that perspective is really important as we continue on this journey. But I want to get into my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening, and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Keep your eyes open, your ears open, not to the world, but to yourself. What do you feel? So you brought up a point just a few minutes ago that these are unexpected things that happen to us. What are the expected things that keep happening over and over again to you? With no matter what relationship, no matter what city or state you move to, there's a certain type of person that seems to just be drawn to you. And you're like, how do I keep getting this type of person? Yes, it's you. And you got to be able to identify what's inside of me that allows this some kind of energy I'm putting out that's attracting this energy to me. But you got to be ears open, eyes open to yourself. And when you do that, when you have a real, when you can self evaluate yourself, you can really evaluate yourself in terms of how was that meeting? You can, I missed our first interview. I identify why I missed that interview. What can I do to make sure that this time, the second time, that I don't miss that interview? And I acknowledge that I missed it. It's not a hush hush, it's not, hey, so I had to reschedule. No, I missed the interview. I'm sorry. And I will make it up. And that's to me part of being a man. So I have this really strong concept for me is that you're not a man. You may be male, but you're not a man until you start accepting responsibilities for your failures and also responsibility for your success. Black people in general, we're trained to just keep moving like a moving target, not to stop, acknowledge we're successful at something and pat ourselves on the back, maybe throw a party. But if we fail, we're also taught to stay in that failure and have a pity party. And for whatever reason, forces around us seem to benefit when we fail and stay in that place. Those same forces aren't necessarily there when you succeed and going, hey, good job. You don't have that. At least I didn't in my life. So I had to create a community around me that I pour into that then pours into me the same way. So I don't need to go out there and get high, or I don't need to go out there and buy a fast car. Not that anybody doing those things, I'm not judging you, but I'm saying that's not a need. I don't need an outside entity to tell me, hey, you're successful, so this is how I can judge my success. I'd rather have people that are around me that say, wow, I see you growth. I see your growth. That feeds me more so than a material or some other type of product that will fuel me to help me measure my success, or I have the ability to, if you're at a certain success height, you don't have as many things that are saying to you, you got to get up tomorrow, you got to be at this meeting. You can goof off at night and you don't have to go into work. So you're not turning up till 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 or whatever the time it is. But that's success for you and your industry. And because of that, you have that ability to say, I'm going to treat myself a certain way. And I think that as Black men who are men, we have to really look at ourselves and the community we create to help us to identify what we're not doing right, but also when we are doing something right, that we receive that community feedback. So the feedback loop isn't one way, it's a continuous thing.
Two things that I want to touch on that I believe it is very important, as you said, just to reinforce what you said, turn the light on ourselves and see first what we're doing and analyze ourselves, because as I said, we attract some things to us and we wonder why these things keep happening and don't realize that we may need to make some adjustment on ourselves so we can move forward, so we can attract different things that are more in alignment with what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And you also said that, which I believe is important, we need to appreciate our own success. We need to celebrate it and also take responsibility. Because if we're going to move forward, if we're going to make the impact, as the question says, how we can play a role in positive change, we have to take that responsibility to make the difference that is needed and own up to it and say, you know what, yes, we can do it. And despite what society says about us, we can play a role in creating positive change. And so those to reinforce those points, I believe is very important, especially turning the light on ourselves sometimes to see what are we doing that keep attracting the same people, especially when they're not good for you as you go forward on your journey. So I think that is really important. So I'm going to go into the next question, and most of these questions are somewhat related. So I can easily go into it and maybe just continue from the points that you have made. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today?
I think by acknowledging our strengths and our weaknesses. So a strength that I think that we do have is that we we love hard. And what I mean by that is that not that other races don't men don't love, but I think Black men, at least the Black men in my life, the Black men who've been a part of my life, have been strong supporters of their families, of their jobs. We when a Black man loves on you, it's phenomenal. And so knowing that we have this gift to love strongly and to love hard, I think we need to look at that and really be able to say that's our flag. Hey, we love. We're not given a space, in my opinion, till now. I would say last 3 to 4 years after the murder of George Floyd. Now, Black men, Black male viewpoints or topics or conversations are being embraced. And so this used to be a barbershop topic, but even in that, you were a minority. If you talked about how Black men love, they were like, yeah, yeah, someone said, yeah. And then, hey, the Nets, they about to beat the Sixers. And, it would shift. So maybe got 2 seconds of identifying our strength and identifying our weakness. And then it was on to another thing. I don't think that we can continue to do that. One main reason is we have a whole new generation of kids. I call them the returning generation. I believe that these kids are our great grandparents or great great grandparents come back to save our butts. We have a 6-year-old in Georgia who learned to farm at 3. She's now the youngest certified farmer in Georgia. We
Wow.
had an 8-year-old before COVID who told her parents that her brother dropped out of barber school and they couldn't afford to lose that money. So she was taking his place, and she became the youngest licensed barber in Philadelphia. We had the boy who was the Time Magazine Kid of the Year for last year. He was from Texas, a 10-year-old. He helped figure out how to get 100,000 people who were suffering from food insecurities fed for Thanksgiving of 2021. And he
Wow.
talked about he was going to do that in January of 2021. And he mapped out the whole year and he got it. We have two not Cadens, I keep saying that name wrong. Caden, 2CADEN, in Georgia, just so happened to be. Caden Harris and Johnson. Caden Johnson has his own nonprofit. He's 12. He's had that nonprofit for 7 years. He
Wow.
helps find gloves and hats for the winter and gives and donates them to kids in his community and other communities throughout Georgia. So they have hats and gloves. They don't have to, because in the South sometimes just not think about hats and gloves. Where up north that's a staple. And then Caden Harris, who's on LinkedIn a lot, he's 10. So Caden Johnson is 12. Caden Harris is 10. He has a financial literacy bus that goes around Georgia. He just spoke at the UN, I think a couple of days ago, according to his LinkedIn page. So we have this generation, the Generation A's, who are, I call them returning generation. I believe they're great great grandparents' spirits in them. And if we don't identify our weaknesses and our strengths, we're not going to be able to help this next generation who's here to help us. So, that concept, let me help you, let me help you, that helps me. That concept, I believe as fathers, as uncles, as big brothers, as, big brother, brother, sister, mentors, we have to step into a role where we're honest about good and bad. And these little mofos, they are not here for the illusions. They're here for facts so they can help, I believe.
And I'm really glad you said it and share those things that the younger generations are doing, because you hear people talk about it all the time that like these kids today, they're not staying young. They're picking up on everything that you put out there. You know, they're learning so fast. We can't, like, as you said, we have to now be honest with the things that we need to do and for the changes that we want, because as you shared, and I can support that. We have to position them because they have to help to move the needle forward. We have to start it and be honest with ourselves, but they are the ones that's going to really push this thing forward. But we have to start, and we have to, start showing up with that mindset that we have to give them somewhat a foundation or a door for them to explore, for them to be great, because as you said, they're not here for the illusion. So we have to give them that space, but stay with them at the same time to make sure they fulfill that great mission or vision that they're here for. So yeah.
Or they fail greatly. And when they fail greatly, they have you to bounce on. They have us to come back from. I was a kid that was on a flight with, and he was dressed immaculately, and he had a mask on. Looked like he was probably 7 or 8. So I gave his guardian, I don't know if his grandmother or mother, I gave her a card to say, look, if he needs a scholarship or anything in coming up in life, he wants to play esports or whatever, I have 1,001 connections. I want to make sure this young man, succeeds. And turns out that he had the same background as far as religion as what I was his age was raised in. So it's hilarious that his grandma was guardian alluded to his background, which is the same background as me. And I was like, wow, that's full circle. I'm seeing this little person that reminded me of me and this how I dressed in the 70s as a little 7-year-old. I'm in 2022 seeing a reflection of myself. And turns out this reflection of myself is really a reflection of myself because he was raised the same way I was raised. And I'm like, whoa. But my point to say that is that means that he may at some point I no longer identify with my background that I was raised in. And when he does identify the problems in that background, there needs to be somebody there to say, there was nobody there for me. I was considered a heretic, or I was disowned by my parents when I decided that I no longer want to be part of that religion. So, but I had to navigate that by myself. The goal to me is when you fail, quote unquote failure, for different people, different concepts. When you fail and you fail miserably, who's going to be there to pick you up? And another point of that, really powerful. And then, man, I'm having some connections today that are crazy. There is a unfortunate, and this is trigger warning. There's a stat that's happening in the last 3 years. Not this young man's age, but 3 years from now, he'll be the age. At 10, Black boys are the highest rate of committing suicide.
Wow.
So right now, Black boys aged 10 through 17 are killing themselves more than any other race on the planet.
Wow.
And that's a horrible statistic to have. Horrible. It's even more important that we be there for them.
Yes, as Black men, we have to be that example and share with them, be their guide, be their mentor, and be the role models, because life can get at you. Because they told us when we were growing up that we're not supposed to express how we feel, and if they're not going to express themselves, we have to show them. We have to break that cycle and let them know that they can talk about their challenges. They can talk about what they're going through. They can talk about the things that bothers them, because the more they talk about it, the easier it is to get past those challenging situations. And because that's a valid point, because the first time I came across that statistics, I was shocked. I couldn't believe
Me
it.
neither.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. You think it would be different, and so it was awareness that shocked me, and I came across it. So that's a valid point. But to go back to what you said, for us as Black men, we have to now be the leaders that we have never been, be the role models that we have never been, not just for ourselves, but for the generation that's coming behind us. So I'm going to go into the next question. And what or who inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? I know you see you in technology, and I know you said it was like almost accident, and it looked as if you were intentional. But yeah, who inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
So along the way, originally my first business, I think I incorporated in the in 2000, and that was in my head my father, because he had a janitorial business that was successful until his business partner decided to leave the business, and then they shut down that business. My father was always a side hustle, secondary business. The janitorial business was his main business at that time. But then once he went to corporate, he then also we refurbished furniture that we'd find on the street, and we would sell it at flea markets in New Jersey and also in Canal Street in New York. So for me, initially, that was my dad thinking about his business and stuff. He did not embrace me having a business the way I thought he would. He didn't want that for me. And so I shifted from him being my role model to A.G. Gaston.
Okay.
A.G. Gaston is a brother. There's a book called The Black Titan, and it's written by his niece, who is a news journalist from New York. And she talks about her uncle and her great uncle and what he was able to do as one of the founders of the money behind the Birmingham bus boycott. Also, he had the first hotel, black-owned hotel. He had a number of about 8 to 9 businesses there in Birmingham. There's the A.G. Gaston Foundation. And then after learning A.G.'s story, I also got the book Think and Grow Rich. And in that book, it talks about having a mastermind alliance and of your ancestors. So thinking of your board of directors of ancestors. So for me, I see A.G. Gaston there. I see Ron Brown, who was the Secretary of Commerce when I was growing up. And then I see Reginald Lewis. His book is called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? He was a financier and one of the first Black persons to do $1 billion deal with his company. So those brothers sit around the table and inspire me. I've had several men throughout my career that I identified as men that are phenomenal men. You know, they take care of their families. They do what a man should do, but they also are excellent in communication. Their feelings. One of my clients right now is a brother by the name of Dr. DeForest Soaries. And Dr. Soaries is tirelessly pushing himself and his 3 different companies to make sure that Black people get out of debt. Right now, he's gotten $38 million worth of debt wiped off the table for Black folks. It's a free program he has. And he's pushing to get to 100 million by next year of Black debt wiped away. And so he has a team. It's one of my first times I've been with a Black company as a consultant. Their team he's built has no ego. He has team members in London. He has team members in Africa. The Africa team is actually our graphics and our data team. So they handle our Salesforce. They handle internal company graphics. We have a team huddle. He's very organized. At the same time, his LinkedIn is better than my LinkedIn, which is rare. I have a diversity. I have a complete. Nobody's in every single industry. I have so much, but Dr. Soaries has even better. And I was just like, wow, I've never seen. So I'm inspired usually by the brothers around me at some point in my life. For some reason, I attract and identify phenomenal Black men and have for a number of years. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is that people transition. And so you have this phenomenal brother, right? And then they're no longer with us. And so you have to be able to deal with that change. And what really helps me is the fact that I know I have this board, this masterminds alliance of ancestors. So they leave, they then go to the board. And so now I still have them with me, present every day of my life, along with people I've never met. I never met AG. I never met Ron Brown. I never met Reginald Lewis. But they sit on that board. And when I have ideas, when I have issues, I can go to my Mastermind Alliance and talk to them.
Yeah, I remember reading that in Think and Grow Rich, and that's a great book. I have the Titan, the Black Titan here myself. I haven't
Ah,
read it. Yeah,
that's
it's
why we like each other.
yeah, I really love his story and the things that he
Yes,
was doing back then. And he wasn't the
yes,
person that talks about what he was doing until
that,
later. Yeah, and
that,
that's one
that.
thing like we need to do today in going forward, in making a difference. We have to be silent about some of the things that we're doing because not everyone wants to see us as Black people progress. And if we're in the position to move the needle, we don't have to make any noise about it. Just move the needle. And once we can do that, man, we would accomplish so much. But sometimes I think we get into this thing that everybody needs to know that we're moving the needle forward. And we don't have to. We can silently help and the communities that need it, the people that need it, and just keep making our communities better because I know we're in a better position than 50 years ago, where we have more money today than 50 years ago. We have more ownership today, but yet still there are so many still in need. And if we can do those things without talking about it, man, there'd be so much. Other communities, other ethnic groups are doing it. Why don't we do it and don't talk or brag about it? Oh, I helped 100 people, and every minute you got to be talking about it. Let's move the needle forward, and sometimes just move and let it be seen, the evidence of the change, the evidence of the progress, and I think if we get to that point, man, you'll be surprised the accomplishment we have within our community as Black people. But I'm going to put these two questions together: the current climate, and also what is your perspective of the current climate, and what change would you like to see amongst Black men? I know you're touching some of that already, but what's the current climate, and what can we do in general to make some changes?
Well, what you said, when you said what you just said, the voice inside me said that we are, it's the programming, right? By surroundings and this, the people I'm around. And I just go automatically to what the voice inside said. And so the voice inside said, yeah, but, and that yeah, but is because I deal with those type of objections. So
Yes.
yes, we are making more money, but or we're having more, we've opened more businesses than ever before. Black women, particularly,
Yeah.
we lost 40% of Black businesses in COVID, but we got that 40% back, and we now actually have 20% over that 40%. So we're at 60% more Black businesses today than we were in 2019. It's crazy. That statistic, though, you'll have people that will say, yeah, but. And I'm so programmed to deal with the yeah, buts that they come up in my head when I hear people talk. And I know what I'm going to say next to that yeah, but. And so I think that one of the things I would like to see change is that we become balanced,
Okay.
that we, whether it's politics, religion, not everything's going to fit everybody. That's just a fact. It's not, we are not a monolith. We are different, unique. We have all kinds of backgrounds and family tribe. We have certain traits that run through us. But my lifestyle of entrepreneurship and not having a quote unquote safety net by having a 401k, which is, I am changing that, but it's not a lifestyle for everybody. So I'm not going to advocate entrepreneurship in the way I do things for everybody. And I'm cool with that. I don't think it is for everybody. Just like I don't think every religion or every relationship, some people have open marriages, some people have committed monogamous relationships. I can listen to you and hear what you're saying and know that you're not wrong. That works for you. And I'm happy. And I may have a question or two to see, how it's working for you. But I'm not, my question is to judge you or to tell you you're wrong. My question is to understand more about you and see how you fit in to my community. And maybe I can connect you to somebody else, or maybe you can be inspiration to somebody who's just starting out in that same path. But I feel like as Black men, we aren't we really is a few of us, there's a very small percentage of us that's in the middle, that are balanced and really stay in the middle. We try to keep it all together. But it's like 10% of us are like holding the line. And then there's like 50% that can kind of sway either way. And then there's like 20% are knuckleheads. And then there's another 10% that are just like adamant their way is on the highway. And it's a challenge because we talk about Black men as a whole. We don't talk about the fractures, the schisms, whether it's religion, whether it's class, you are part of a fraternity, you grew up with both parents, you grew up in the hood, raised by your grandmother, you went to college, you didn't go to college. Military, a lot of Black men that we don't discuss is that they are legacy. I've met in the last 4 years so many legacy military families. I had no idea. Good friend of mine, he is third generation military, and today is Veterans Day, so it's really apropos. But my point is that that's a side of I was raised that the only reason you went into the military because you couldn't you didn't have a skill set, and it wasn't a family business. I didn't think of the military until like I said, the last 4 years. And I'm realizing every guy I talk to, every brother I talk to, someone in his family, more likely his father or brother, was in the military. It's a family tradition, and it works for their family. Like they have houses, they have. I'm like, well, how? And I didn't realize that. So I think being balanced, and I would love for us to look at the balance of life, and we're going to be balanced. We're not going to be over on this side, not over on that side. We really strive to be balanced in our dealings with each other, and allow grace and space for somebody to have a different opinion of you and let them be adamant in their place of imbalance. That's okay too. But us, those of us that can be balanced, to be balanced.
I appreciate that perspective because, as you said, we're not going to be able to control what other people do, but we don't have to find fault or make that be an issue
all the time. Like,
yeah, where it takes you out of your own element. And so you don't want to get to that point where someone in balance take you off your trajectory or what you stand for. So I believe that is important as we go forward, and the balance, as you shared, it helps us to when you say the balance, so does it help us to move forward better, or how do you?
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking about the difference. Some people might say, "Well, it's a luxury, Martin. You have a luxury of being balanced." I was raised by this type of parent, this type of father, and I was like, you know what? Yes, it's a luxury. It's the progression of the legacy of the Black man. But if we looked at like with Booker T. Washington versus Du Bois, it wasn't one or the other. It's both. Both have valid points. We needed both, but there weren't a lot of moderates. We'll say, we use that word in politics a lot. We weren't a lot of people that were moderate. It was either this way or that way, and it's like, no, brothers, we need both. We need the Booker T with Black businesses and being Black centered. We need Du Bois with collaboration and using civil rights as a weapon. We need both. And I was thinking about Byron Allen. I was thinking about earlier all the Black men that you said that were moved in silence. The ones that I think of as success that you don't know. Like Byron doesn't tell you, I'm going to go buy. He's talking about things, but believe me, when he talks about it publicly, he's already had that. He's already done it. He's already got the paperwork ready for it. So he doesn't tell you, I have an idea, I'm going to go buy a whole bunch of television stations or this. He'll tell you after he's bought 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's a juggernaut. It's already moving. Like it's not, they aren't forecasting. They aren't getting on Shade Room and saying some crazy stuff. The same thing. I'm trying to think of the other brother I was thinking about, but the men that I think of who make impact, as you said, move in silence. The balance that they exude, at least publicly, helps them make deals with somebody that you would think they wouldn't be able to make a deal. They aren't considered imbalanced men, And even in the entertainment space, a brother I look up to is Jay Prince. And I look up to Jay Prince because he's dealt with a lot of adversities, and he will never come out for a positive or something negative or for until after something has passed. He's very silent, moves in silence. Does not you see him occasionally, but it's not a thing. But if you juxtaposition him versus other people in entertainment who are always on Breakfast Club or always in some kind of controversy, that's to me being a man is to be able to be balanced and not have to utilize your mouth to attract attention that then becomes you're part of this imbalanced situation. Like you can be pulled, like you said earlier, pulled into an imbalanced situation. You may be balanced, but because your mouth or because you've had the need to talk about something, you're then pulled into a situation. And so I think part of that scenario for moving forward is that I believe the universe blesses those that are balanced better than those that are imbalanced. Because the other side, whatever the yin and yang that is, the other side of the table, well, it's already too much of this. So we can't give you that blessing because we already got that over here. We need the opposite. You can't think that way because you're only one way. But I do realize that is a privilege. That is not something that we're not taught this at 10. So my goal is for us to have rituals and have a rites of passage for Black boys at 10 that white kids do and taking a gap year in their college, or white kids do by backpacking across Europe, and when they're 19 or 20. I want our Black boys to have that, and Black girls to have that privilege, but I want this to be a gender-based rites of passage. So the girls on one side, boys on the other side, separate, and go through their rites of passage where they actually start to question what's inside. They develop the skill set to know about balance. And then they can choose. If you're not, I don't want to create Black Stepford kids, but I do want our Black children to have this option and to know the difference between being imbalanced and being balanced, and really be able to have a thinking, full thinking ability. So when they decide what they want to do when they're 17, and then by the time they're 22, they're like, I'm done with that. I want to change careers. There's no baggage. They aren't beating themselves up. They have all these options and they're happy to change options. But that imbalance says you got to stay at that job for 20 or 30 years because, you'll be a failure if you just leave and try something new. Just stop being congressman and now you're a chef. Like what? Why are you going to drop? Because that's your passion. You love food. You realize you love the taste of, I don't know, banana peppers. And you want to experiment with banana peppers and different types. Go for it. Do it, brother, sister. Do that. But we're not, a lot of times I feel, men, we're not balanced. So we stay in situations when we know we need to leave that situation, but we're looked at ourselves as failures if we leave and choose ourselves. Growth and going forward, that balance to me does affect our growth and going forward.
Yeah, that perspective is and a great reminder as we think about where we want to go from here, because we can't be in balance or stay in situations that we know will not help us, will not benefit us if we're thinking about making progress. So I think that is a great reminder to all of us as we try to live out our purpose in life. So my next question is, what life lesson did you learn late that you think is beneficial to this generation or to the listeners?
It's a really good question. I think that I can't control what I want to control. So I want my daughter to grow up never breaking her leg, never experiencing abuse. I want her to never have not never, but I want her to deal with heartbreak a certain way. I may not be here tomorrow. So what do I do with that information that I can't impact her if I'm no longer here? What do I build that allows her to have a legacy, hopefully, and that she will be able to turn to if I'm not around? That is something that I think if we started from that angle and we dealt with our mortality and the out of control, there's a bunch of things that we cannot control. And when we deal with those things that are within our control, and use those tools. We have tools that we've never had on this planet before to make an impact and to deal with things that are beyond our control. We have enough, like I said, vehicles, tools, people to deal with things. But the question is, are we going to really be able to deal with that? And I think if I'd have learned that lesson 20 some years ago, it would have helped me move forward as a person versus beating myself. Like I beat myself up a lot, I think in my mid 30s, early 30s to mid 30s. And then I got to be 37 ish and was like, F this. Like, I'm tired of beating myself up for stuff that is already passed and I had no control over. And realizing I had no control over that helped me realize that I shouldn't be beating myself up for this because there was nothing I could do to stop it or could have done differently. And even when you can stop certain things, it doesn't mean it's going to be the impact that you want or the outcome that you want, but it just means you can impact it. And if you're impacting something, to me, that's the success. The success is that I did what I could to impact that. I'm on to the next thing. The outcome may or may not be able to be the one I want, but I don't have control over everything. And I won't be able to control everything. So it's unrealistic of me to beat myself up for things that I can't control. But I spent a number of years beating myself up.
So, and that's a good point as well. For anyone to learn to control what they can control and know that there are going to be things that they cannot control. And how you operate within those spaces when you're dealing with things that you cannot control can either benefit you in a more positive way, or you can easily pick the lessons from what's happening because you cannot control it. And the first part of what you said, in part in regards to what you'd share, is about legacy. You talk about your daughter and you talk about what would you put in place. And the earlier we start thinking about the legacy, the better. We can't wait until we are in certain situations because certain situations may be too late. Is to think about the legacy that we want to create. We can start that today. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter where you are or what position. If it is something that you haven't started, something that we need to think about as we go forward on this journey, what our legacy will be. And that leads to this part, or my last question. What impact do you, well, before I get to the last question, before I get to that question, where can the listeners find you and support what you're doing to make a difference?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the space, Doctor. They can go to LinkedIn and everywhere I am LMJ Pratt. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So you can follow me on those platforms. We have something called Your Black News. That's available on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. So just word Your Black News on Twitter. And hopefully in a couple of months, we'll be able to announce that we are on finished with our app and we're on all the other platforms when it comes to streaming. So Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon. That's our goal. We've signed a contract with a company that is doing a revenue share. So our nightly news will be aired on those platforms.
Man,
in addition
that's
to where
great.
we do it now.
No, man, that's awesome. That's awesome, especially with the nightly black news. And it's always great to have a space where we can share what's happening within our community. And I think it's controlling the narrative is really important as we go forward. So I'll make sure I follow up with you and to be able to share that. But I will also put a link in somewhere here so the listeners, when they're listening, if 5 months or a year from now,
Yes.
they will still have access to the link so they can see some of the work that you're doing, because I think that is really important as we move forward as a community. So my next question, or my final question, what impact do you want to have on the world?
I want to be able to say on my tombstone that he empowered his community with information. That's my goal, and that is really what I am living for, to make sure that we've empowered each other, but I myself can empower my community with information.
Man, that's awesome. Mr. Pratt, thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact. Man, you share a lot of great insights and perspective, and I know the listeners will appreciate it. And we're looking forward to having more conversations on how we can make a difference within our community. Mr. Pratt, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Cross. Thank you for creating a space intentionally.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.